When I first encountered John Powell, without having any idea who he was ambling across the Bioneers campus. There was something so riveting to me about his presence. I think it was a combination of the calm intentionality of his gait, the sense of serenity that just surrounded him, and a warmth, openness, and curiosity that captivated me. I promised myself then that I would find ways to learn from and with him. In my many years of producing Bioneers, I've observed and learned from all kinds of leaders, but I don't think I've ever met anyone who combines passionate engagement with a seemingly otherworldly capacity for calm and inquiring centeredness, as well as a uniquely incisive, original, and inventive mind with a truly radiant and compassionate soul, someone whose center seems to orient so purely and so consistently toward the sacred and justice until I encountered John Powell. John has had a long and illustrious academic, legal, and activist career and has long been one of the nation's and the world's leading thinkers and scholars on civil rights and liberties, race, ethnicity, housing, poverty, and democracy. A professor of law and of African American and ethnic studies at Berkeley, John is also the director there of the Haas Institute for a Fair and Inclusive Society, a groundbreaking institution that brings together researchers and scholars, community partners and policymakers to seek to identify and eliminate the barriers to an inclusive, just, and sustainable society. Before coming to Berkeley, John was the executive director of the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Ohio State. Prior to that, he founded and directed the Institute on Race and Poverty at the University of Minnesota. And before that, he was director of legal services in Miami, Florida, and national legal director of the ACLU. He has lived and worked globally in Africa as a consultant to the governments of Mozambique and South Africa. He also lived and worked in India and also in South America and Europe. And he's taught at numerous law schools, including Harvard and Columbia. He serves on the board of a number of leading advocacy and philanthropic nonprofits, including, we are truly honored to say, since earlier this year, of Bioneers. John is the author of several books, including Racing to Justice, Transforming Our Concepts of Self and Other to Build an Inclusive Society, which has been called a brilliantly original and provocative challenge to the current social order. I warmly commend it to you. John uses his piercing analytical mind to excavate, clarify, and expose some of the most challenging and insidious realities about our society, especially as regards race and class. He draws connections to surface otherwise often invisible connective tissue, to expose the structural and legal architecture that has upheld our divisive and unjust systems for far too long. At the same time, he also explores the core universal human patterns and needs that live within us all of othering and belonging. We're living in very dangerous and polarized times, and we need courageous and passionate leaders who inspire us to stand firmly for what is right, calm leaders who can illuminate ways forward with compassion and relational intelligence, creative and inquiring leaders who can diligently unearth previously invisible patterns, and leaders with a deep moral and ethical compass who remind us not to injure our own humanity and inner spirit by demonizing those who are different than we. Please join me in welcoming a remarkable man who embodies all those qualities in one, and who can illuminate how we can race to justice while embodying serenity, compassion, and empathy. John A. Powell.
Good afternoon. You know what we need is really incredible, smart, dedicating, and loving friends. And I'm pleased to count Nina and Kenny in that. It's my circle of friends and all of you. So I want to give a special thanks to Nina and Bioneers for bringing us together. And I'm going to share some thoughts with you this morning. But before I do, I just want to give a shout out. First of all, Haas has been represented here. I think there have been a number of speakers. My assistant Darren is here. And I also want to give a shout out to a special friend, Shanti, who I think is like 12 or 13. No, actually, you're older. You got older on me. So I think she's 14 now, just started high school. So Shanti, thanks for coming down to Bioneers. So my talk is about co-creating an alternative space to heal, although it's not. So you can forget this slide. So where's that alternative space to heal? I think it's called the earth. So the earth belongs to all of us. We have to respect it. It supports us. And if healing is going to take place, it has to be on the whole earth, not just a corner someplace, not a place just to hide. We have to make the earth a safe place for life. And I am, because you are. We're profoundly, profoundly interconnected. We don't always live that way. We don't always acknowledge it. But if we're going to heal, we have to live it, experience it, and create institutions that celebrate it. Instead, we're in a situation where the country and the world is more divided. We're seeing right-wing ethnic nationalism blow up all around the world. We're seeing every day, every week, crazy things coming out of the White House. I mean, like crazy. And by most accounts, we're more divided as a country than we've been since the Civil War. That's the bad news. Let me give you some good news. There are more people who oppose white supremacy than at any time in U.S. history. So we're in a battle. And it's a battle of those who believe in love and life and those who think that's only for a narrow few. And these are two authors. One on the left is Samuel Huntington. He wrote a book called Clash of Civilizations, and which really is an attack on most of the world who are not white and Christian. And he worries that the United States is becoming too diverse, that there are too many people coming here who are not white and Christian. And he suggests that we need to go back to some glorious past when America was white again, or great again, or whatever, the same. Of course, there was never such a time when America was white. They sort of skipped over the fact that the country was occupied when they got here. But Huntington, despite being a noted scholar, sort of skips over that. But he actually looks to the past. So people who are afraid of what's happening in the world are constantly trying to take us back to some imaginary past. And there's Jeff Chang, who looks at the changing world, the changing diversity, and he written a book called Who We Be. And he looks at an imaginary future, a future where all of us belong, where the world is very diverse, where there is no supremacy. And that's the battle that we're in right now. Do we actually embrace Jeff Chang, or do we embrace Samuel Huntington? And the country itself has been fighting this since its very beginning. The Declaration of Independence, we the people. But then again, we the people, who are the we? Who constitute the we and we the people? And of course, at the beginning of the Constitution, black people weren't in that we, women weren't in that we, Native Americans weren't in that we, white people without property was not in that we. So even though it had this glorious sounding term, it then defined this we very narrowly. And so to some extent, that's still the battle we're in. Can we define the we so that it's inclusive and not exclusive? So I talk about this in the context of othering and belonging. And it takes on all different types of forms. And I hope many of you will actually come to our conference on othering and belonging. And othering is a wonky word, so I got this technical definition to help you out. So one person says, "Stop othering me." What's othering? Well, your kind wouldn't understand. So othering happens at all different kinds of levels. And this cartoon suggests the interpersonal level. And that's bad enough. We've all had experience of going someplace and feeling like, this is not my place, these are not my peeps. But what happens when the country, when the government, when the police say, you don't belong? It takes on a much more pernicious and dangerous form. What happens when the President of the United States, we call him 45 in my house, what happens when 45 says that these people don't belong? That's a very dangerous space, and we have to reject that space. And most liberals, and I would dare say many of you are probably at least liberal, if not progressive, and most people who embrace some concept of spirituality, my guess would be many of you do, would actually reject the notion of othering. And unfortunately, though, many liberals, when they reject othering, they actually adopt something called saming. That is, they say, we're all exactly the same. There is no difference. But the opposite of othering is not saming, it's belonging. And belonging actually embraces difference. It embraces difference and learns from them. It's not afraid of difference. And yet it doesn't make those differences infinite. As the United States grows in diversity, and it's growing in diversity across a number of important axes, the country becomes more nervous, becomes more anxious. And this is not just the United States, it's all around the world. So you see, all of these ethnic national movements are organized against, around some imagined identity. They might be Muslims, they might be people of a different language, they might be Latinos, they might be gays and lesbians, they might be transgender, but there's always this fear of the other. And again, the liberals' response to that is to try to address that fear just by saying, they're just like us. And both of those are problematic. So there's two major responses to this anxiety. And change produces anxiety. That's the natural human phenomena. If you were to get married, move your residency, and change your job within a 2-year period, your chances of having a heart attack goes up about 50%. If you're one of those unfortunate people who marry someone you don't like, it goes up to 75%. So even when positive things are happening, the human organism can only process so much change over a short period of time. But there's two major ways to sort of deal with this change. One is called bridging, and the other one's called breaking. And bridging actually is about connecting to the other. The other is always imaginary. There's no natural other, there's no natural community. We're constituting these constantly. But bridging actually invites a sense of empathy, deep listening, and connection. Breaking sees the other as a threat, sees the other with fear, as somehow attacking who we are. And most of the stories, most of the practices that we engage in our society, even in progressive communities, are breaking. We're constantly defining ourselves in opposition to the other. We're constantly defining the we in a narrow way. And so again, that's the big fight, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. Do we bridge or do we break? Now, for those of you who are bridgers, and I hope before the day is out, if not already, you're all our bridgers. I have a word of caution for you from my good friend Bell Hooks. She says, bridges are made to walk on. So when you first become a bridge between two communities that see themselves in opposition, you will be walked on, and occasionally, hopefully not too often, you'll be stomped on. But I say this, if the world does not bridge, if we do not have more bridges in the world, if we continue to break, we won't have a world. So your work as bridgers, even though sometimes you'll be walked on, occasionally stomped on, is critical for the survival of the planet. And we see the rise of hate in the United States. And there's another slide I didn't include. We also see the rise of love. Both things happening at the same time. There's, in fact, a book by a friend of mine, Cheryl Cashin, called Loving, and it's about the loving family from 1967. Othering in America. It's not just done by people, it's done by corporations, it's done by the religious right, and it's done by the alt-right. Now, it's actually interesting. When I say the religious right, who was the religious right that engaged in othering? When you think of evangelical Christians, there was one of the most powerful groups that supported Trump. But actually, that's not quite right. The evangelicals that supported Trump were white. Black evangelicals, Latino evangelicals, Native American evangelicals did not support Trump. So it's defined largely about this fear of the racial other. Now you may wonder, why am I dwelling on this? So some of you remember the one-drop rule. Remember the one-drop rule? The one-drop rule is that if white blood gets mixed with one drop of black blood, it's destroyed. I mean, black blood is powerful stuff. Well, maybe it's not so powerful. Maybe the thing is, white blood is really fragile. Of course, I'm not talking about blood at all. We're really talking about the ideology of exclusive whiteness. That's what's fragile, not white people. White people are heterogeneous, just like any people. And some of them are bridgers and some of them are breakers. But it's the fragility of this white purity that Bannon and others represent that's fragile. Anytime you're talking about something that's pure, you're also talking about something that's fragile. The world is not pure. Diversity is not pure. The biology, environment is not pure. It's constantly engaged with other parts of itself. And that's what makes it strong. Now, I don't know, my father's a Christian minister. I'm not going to show him the slide. He would be very confused. How did Trump and Jesus end up in the same? I'll just let you dwell on that for a while. So again, part of the thing that we have is that the left is actually afraid of difference. And so in that sense, the left engaged in saming. And I would argue to you that saming is a weak version of breaking. There's a wonderful book by James Baldwin called The Price of the Ticket. When James Baldwin was at the height of his literary career, the white establishment finally said, okay, this Negro can write. And they invited him to join all these literary clubs. And they said, but don't remind us that you're gay. And don't actually bring any of your black friends with you. And James Baldwin said, no thanks. He said, the price of the ticket. Leave who you are and you can be like us. So saming is not really that good. Now it's better than the right wing, which actually believes that the other has to be destroyed or is in some way inferior. But let me suggest this, that when we worry on the left about identity politics, we say that the thing that's actually messing up creating a progressive movement in this country is that people are focused on gender, they're focused on their sexual orientation, they're focused on their race. They should focus on something that's universal, that we all share, like the white working class. The problem with identity politics is not the identity and it's not the politics. The problem with identity politics, when it's a problem, is that it's actually breaking. It's not identity politics that's the problem, it's breaking that's the problem. But we can actually focus on gender, we can focus on LGBTQ, we can focus on Black Lives Matters in a way that bridge. But the liberals haven't learned that. And so they say to those groups, stay away and we're going to focus on real issues like the working class, which really means white. And people find that offensive. So we have to actually move beyond breaking and realize that, again, the opposite of othering is not saming. So who's in the circle of human concern? And being here at Bioneers, I'm sure you would catch this and correct me, is why are we only concerned about humans? We're not. We're concerned about life. And this is a tricky thing because I'm going to talk a little bit about narrative in the little time I have left. The stories we tell matter. We're all multiple selves. We're all fluid people. So when we talk about intersectionality, when we talk about the other is actually inside of us. There's a part of us that we haven't claimed. There's a part of us we haven't celebrated. How do we begin to claim that? And narratives help with that. But in a story, in a narrative, and Jonathan and I were talking about this yesterday, there always needs to be, or people say we need a villain. Can we create a we where no one's on the outside of it? Maybe except one or two people. No, I'm just joking. So that's not Trump's we. His we is very small and getting smaller all the time. I have to deviate a little bit from the PowerPoint because, you know, I was around when the O.J. Simpson trial was around. And, you know, I have, people have different beliefs and theories as to whether O.J. did it. But the question was, the glove did not fit. And when I saw Trump's hand, I said, okay, we finally know where the glove fits. I don't know where he was the night of that incident, but anyway. So how do we bridge? We bridge by deeply listening. We bridge by suffering with others, listening to others' suffering. We bridge by engaging. We bridge by organizing, and we bridge by love. It's not easy. It's hard stuff, but it's rewarding stuff. And so as we bridge, we move from an exclusive society to an integrated society to an inclusive society to a belonging society. Now notice that in a belonging society, the structure itself actually changed. So when we talk about belonging, we're not talking about belonging into something that's structurally exclusive and misogynistic, and we're talking about changing the structures themselves. So belonging is not just how we treat each other. Belonging is how do we actually organize our economy, our structures, our schools, our space, that everyone belongs, and recognizing we still have differences. Where do we find such a space? Where Bioneers is starting to lean into that space. Bioneers is about belonging. And yet, as important as it is to recognize each other, just recognizing each other is not enough. As I said, we have to think about those structures too. So we focus on empathy. And empathy is actually just another way of talking about love. Focus on recognizing that we are deeply related already. But then how do we actually acknowledge that? Not just in our interpersonal stuff, but also in our communities. Grace Lee Bob, a fellow Detroiter, and she reminds us, even if the people of our respective communities or our countries are acting in ways that we believe are unworthy of human beings, we must still care enough for them so that their lives and ours, their question and ours, become inseparable. It's not easy to do, but no one said life was going to be easy. So we have examples of efforts to create an inclusive society, to create a belonging society. And we have to deepen those examples. We have to celebrate them. We have to talk about them. You've heard about Standing Rock. And everybody that I know who had any engagement with Standing Rock was talking about, not only was this something important led by indigenous people in our society, but it was belonging. Everybody went there, came back talking about love, talking about the sort of rainbow effect. So it's a wonderful example that belonging already happens in our society. We just have to punch it up. And finally, as our friend Naomi Klein reminds us, no is not enough. It's not enough just to be against something. We have to be clear, what is it we're for? And Connie Heller, which you hear from later today, has this on her website, Fearless, Love More. Fearless, Love More. And yes, we have to get to yes. Thank you. Thank you.